Final Fantasy II's story was much more involved than the tale that was told before it. The characters had preset relationships, and several heroes passed on or blinked away, sacrificing themselves for the greater good. In total, 6 good guys died before the story was over. The plot strangely mirrored that of Star Wars Episode IV, involving young heroes joining a rebellion. The Empire imposed its will using a giant metal ship, with a distraught princess tucked inside. Final Fantasy II almost made its way to the States in 1990 under the subtitle Dark Shadow over Palakia, but it was cancelled due to development time and the release of the Super Nintendo. US audiences would have to wait until 2003 to play Final Fantasy II when it was reinvented, along with its predecessor, for consoles, handhelds, and mobile phones around the world. Final Fantasy II was the first sequel in the industry not to feature any characters or locations from the game that preceded it. It turned the unexpected RPG series into a bona fide franchise, and left Japanese gamers waiting for 16 months to play the next sequel. American gamers didn't get to play it until last year. Final Fantasy III was released in Japan on April 27, 1990, and was once again forged by the team that created the series. It began with an earthquake opening up a hidden cavern entrance on a floating island near the village of Ur. 4 orphaned youngsters disguised as Onion Knights left their guardian in search of the altar cave. Within it, they discovered the Wind Crystal. The crystal bestowed upon them jobs, a Final Fantasy tradition. Instead of choosing one class or having the story do it for you, FF3 let you switch between multiple professions, including newcomers Archer, Scholar, Geomancer, Viking, Magic Knight, Bard, and Sage. All carried specific weapons and armor, and more were unlocked when each new crystal was found. Each job had its own special skill, and Final Fantasy III opened up a new space in your battle menu to include it. This gave thieves the ability to steal, and dragoons the opportunity to jump. But no matter the job, they all leveled up the same way, as the experience point system returned from the first game. 2 of the more significant new jobs were Conjurer and Summoner. Both of them were able to bring forth magical beings for the first time in the series. These summons, like Odin, Ramu, Shiva, Ifrit, Titan, and Leviathan, could be purchased in stores or obtained by defeating the powerful creatures themselves. They played no role in the actual storyline, but their additional firepower was definitely welcome. Just as the second chapter introduced chocobos, the third forced you to meet Moogles, cute, fuzzy little bat-winged bear monsters that guarded the reclusive wizard Doga. The Moogle would become a series staple, selling you magic, fighting alongside your party, and keeping your online house in order. To lighten up the early game's inventory limitations, 3 fed their bird runners a little too much grain and produced fat chocobos, plump creatures that could swallow items and transport heavy loads across the map. A submarine and several new types of airships were introduced in 3, including the Nautilus, Enterprise, and the Invincible, a warship that could be explored like a castle, complete with shops and private quarters. Cid helped you tour the skies once again, and even followed your party around for a while once you freed him from the ghost town of Kazis. The forgetful warrior Desh hitched up with your crew after he gave you mini-magic, the ability to shrink your entire party and enter several mouse-sized areas. The story placed the 4 orphaned heroes in an eternal struggle between the forces of light and darkness. When one was disrupted, the other would call on 4 warriors to reset the fragile equilibrium. Ages ago, foolish mortals attempted to absorb the power of light, calling forth dark warriors to fight back. The Gulgans, a circle of blind prophets, predicted that one day the reverse would occur, and these light warriors would hopefully restore the balance for good. These events came to pass thanks to a spiteful mage named Zand, a pupil of the wizard Noah, and a sentient being called the Cloud of Darkness, a hive mind of evil that aimed to tip the world off kilter while an unstoppable void consumed it. Final Fantasy III was unfortunately shadowed by the release of 6 in America 4 years later. The 6th installment was renamed 3 as it was the 3rd Final Fantasy released in the US. This almost erased all knowledge in the States of the 3rd Famicom game, and meant we wouldn't get our hands on it until it was ported to the Nintendo DS 16 years later. The third Final Fantasy was a huge adventure, definitely the biggest RPG Square had made so far. It brought the most successful elements of the first two games together, and helped build a growing curiosity as the series would soon have to move ahead a generation. But before it made the jump, it met another proud landmark in its 20-year history. On July 12, 1990, 2 months after Final Fantasy III came out in Japan, the original Fantasy was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in America, and a legion of English-speaking gamers boarded an airship ride into the future of role-playing. Join us next week for the third installment in our 13-part Final Fantasy retrospective. In Part 3, we'll continue on to the next two games in the series that premiered the active time battle system and ability points, and began an unforgettable 16-bit trilogy on the Super Famicom.